Hey everybody, it's Chris WARK, and today I'm interviewing Brent Wisner. Brent is a vice president and senior shareholder at the national law firm Baum, Headland, Aristi, and Goldman. Brent oversees all mass tort litigation focusing on pharmaceutical product liability, toxic torts, and consumer fraud class actions. He's the youngest attorney in U.S. history to win a multi-billion-dollar jury verdict. Brent has achieved multiple verdicts totaling $2.4 billion, including Roundup Cancer verdicts against Monsanto, and has negotiated mass tort settlements in excess of $1 billion. So, Brent, I'm excited to talk with you and dig into some of the cases you've been involved with, specifically Monsanto and cancer, and then the Zantac cancer connection and some other things. And I'm excited to see where this goes. Was that intro good enough, or is there something else you'd like to add to it about yourself?
Chris, that was a really wonderful intro. I have very little to add. I think you covered it pretty nicely. I'm a trial lawyer at heart, right? So what I do is I represent people who've been hurt by really bad and evil corporations, and I do what I can to get them their day in court. And sometimes we knock it out of the park, as we did in Monsanto, and many times we lose and no one hears about that. But I like hearing all the victories. You always bat 1,000 if you only count hits, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I appreciate what you're doing so much personally, because as a cancer survivor and a patient advocate, I and many folks that have followed me for a while have read my first book, and I talk about not all, but I talk about many instances of corruption in the pharmaceutical and medical and cancer industries. And the corruption is deep, and it goes all the way down. It goes from doctors to scientists to drug companies to federal regulatory agencies and politicians and even the media. So, I mean, it's pretty vast how much money is influencing pharmaceutical drugs. And so again, thank you for the work you're doing as a survivor and a patient, and just as a citizen. Yeah. It means a lot to me, because I think there's so much corruption happening that is unknown. And even when, I want to dig into what you know, but even when, major cases are won, victories are won, it's still relatively unknown. The media barely even makes a mention of some of these things that have happened, right?
Yeah. It's really funny. A lot of it comes from just how it's all structurally set up. I think a lot of people don't understand the way our regulatory system works. The FDA, the EPA, they don't actually conduct any testing. They don't test products. They don't have a laboratory where they're checking to see if a drug is safe or running clinical trials to see what happens. They are fully at the mercy of the people who are making money off the products, the manufacturers, right? And all they see is what the manufacturers show them. And if you can imagine, just imagine a world where you can completely control what someone sees, right? In that world, right, you can see how it is ripe for manipulation. And so whether it's corruption or just outright manipulation, often a little bit of both, but you see it as structurally built into our system. I mean, if you see an adverse effect with a specific drug or an adverse effect for a pesticide, and you know it, and you just hide it, right? The regulators will never know. And the only time it ever actually gets discovered is when, someone gets cancer and they come to a lawyer and they say, I think there's something going on here. And then we, spend millions and millions of dollars and get billions of documents and engage in 10 years of our lives and find these treasure troves of internal studies and documents that were never shared that tell the whole story. And it's an unfortunate consequence of a breakdown in our regulatory system, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And I think, to put it in very simple terms, it's easy for a drug company to lie about the safety and efficacy of a drug.
Hmm.
in order to get it approved, because the drug company is paying the scientists, they're paying the researchers, they're paying the doctors, they're paying everyone involved
That's
in a
right.
drug trial. And then many of their, many, sometimes it's their own people are sitting on FDA review committees, or people that they're very friendly with, that they have ongoing relationships with, are on these review committees to get drugs approved. And
Or
so,
the people on these committees are looking for a job in the next 6 months and are, signaling to Pfizer or GSK, hey, I'm going to be retiring in 6 months. I'm, love to get a job at, a cushy job within a pharmaceutical company. And they go, of course, we'd love someone of your caliber and expertise. Lo and behold, they say it's safe. It happens all the time. The revolving door is actually kind of gross, to be
right,
frank.
it's a major, major revolving door between drug companies and the FDA and the CDC. People are just going back and forth, right?
That's right.
And with every trip around the sun, so to speak, there's a lot more financial incentive. So, because you go to the FDA, you work there for a while, you make some connections, you go back, work for a pharmaceutical company, and you've got these connections at the FDA now, and you can help them make things happen. So, all that to say, it's easy, relatively easy to get a drug approved, even though it costs billions of dollars and a lot of time and effort and all this. They get these drugs approved. They have complete control over the data and show what they want to show, and they hide what they
Hmm.
want to hide. And then
Hmm.
it takes years and years for the truth to come out, right? If the truth is that, oh, this drug is actually very dangerous and it's risky and it's increasing your risk of death or heart disease or cancer or autoimmune disease or whatever, it takes years for that to matriculate out, because patients are getting sick, right? And like you mentioned, it's usually not just one person, but it takes a lot of people getting sick over a long time
Hmm.
for someone to step in and connect the dots.
That's right.
Sometimes it's doctors or scientists or researchers, and to start saying, hey, there's a pattern here. This is a problem. The easy example for me is Vioxx, which was
Sure.
on the market for
Sure.
5 years, and over 50,000 people died. The estimates even are, there's,
That we know about, right?
yeah, that we definitely, and the estimates are, some people think it's over 100,000 people died from Vioxx. And,
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, it was on the market for 5 years. So,
We see it way worse. Most of the time, it takes 10 to 15 years to expose these things because the drug companies have a 10-year incentive to conceal, right? So for 10 years, they have market exclusivity. They can sell it as a brand name drug and make boatloads of money. After 10 years, when the generics enter the market, that's when usually the truth starts coming out because other companies now have access to these data, have these databases. The brand companies moved on to some other products, so they're not, beating down scientists that raise concerns. The incentives shift. And that's usually when the truth comes out. It's funny. In one of the litigations that I was working on years ago, it involved an antidepressant, and it was an antidepressant used to treat children. And there was one study that had been done that showed that this drug was more effective than a sugar pill in treating depression in children. The problem was they didn't follow the study. It was completely unblinded, meaning the children and the parents who were getting the drug and the ones that were getting the sugar pill knew what they were getting. Okay, so it doesn't really control for anything. It makes it even worse. But in any event, this is a drug that has a known side effect of inducing suicidality in children. All right, it specifically is known that. But the idea is, well, because it's effective at treating depression, is treating depression for 1,000 kids better than the one or two that will take their life because of it. That's the sort of medical balancing that they're doing. The problem is half of that, does it actually work, right, is completely manipulated by this study. And I deposed the FDA senior level director. I got him into a deposition, kind of unheard of. And I asked him about it. And I showed him the data and I showed him how it was unblinded. And he went, wow, I didn't know any of that. And I said, okay, so what do you think now it should be taken off the market? And he's like, well, I don't know. I mean, we have to take into consideration, the financial interests and the impact on the industry. I'm like, what? And then he explained to me that his job at the FDA wasn't to regulate drugs, it was to service the industry. And that was just blew my mind. And I didn't realize not only just how captured of an agency the FDA was, but that they were overtly captured. It wasn't like a secret. Like, we are here as a service function to the pharmaceutical industry. And when those are the people who are the ones that we believe have our backs, alarms should go off, which is why I, personally don't touch a drug unless it's been on the market for at least 30 years, right? Because then I know it's safe, or we know what's going on.
So few people know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the majority of the population believes the FDA is an agency that is protecting them, right? That's what it's supposed to do. That was like in the charter or whatever. When when it was founded, you think, okay, this is what this is about. But right, that's pretty wild that he admitted that in court.
It's worse. So like in other litigations, and this happens pretty routinely now, there'll be a known side effect for a drug. Okay. The FDA has said, oh yeah, this is a problem. It should have been warned about. Okay, fine. We sue the drug company and say, you didn't warn and you caused this person's injury, right? And we go to court and the FDA shows up and, using taxpayer dollars, is filing legal briefs in our cases saying you should not be allowed to sue the drug company because we approved this to begin with. And that absolves them of liability. It's called preemption. I mean, that's actually happening on a daily basis. And so when you say that they're here to protect the consumer, they're actively protecting the industry. That's how captured they are. It's not a function of, they're just kind of falling asleep at the wheels. No, they're there to give the rubber stamp so that the industry can then come to all of us, come to the courts and say, the FDA says it's safe. It's safe, even though they did. I mean, it's part of my language, but it's just, it's an outrageous system. And I think it's disturbing that people both don't know about it and that we just kind of let it keep going, right? And then they get mad that plaintiffs' lawyers are running around doing these lawsuits and getting these big verdicts. I wish my job didn't exist. I really do. It is a side effect of a broken regulatory system. Anyway, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox for a sec.
No, I've invited you on for the soapbox. This is what we want, Brent. We want you on the soapbox. That is pretty wild. So I'm definitely learned something just now, that the FDA would actually come in and try to defend the drug companies and say, you can't sue them because we approve this drug.
Exactly right.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it was started in 2004 when the general counsel for the FDA sort of shifted the FDA's position on this. Before this, the FDA was like, dude, file lawsuits. We don't care. We're just here to regulate drugs. But the guy was named Dan Troy. He did this for about 4 years and started this concept, and the FDA started showing up in all of our cases. And then he left the FDA. And you know what he does now?
He works for a drug company.
He's the general counsel for GlaxoSmithKline, right? So, okay.
It took a while. I've never heard of the guy. That was a wild guess. Yeah.
And he's still there. And now he's like, kind of one of the brain, the sort of brain trusts in the pharmaceutical industry of how to defend against lawsuits and how to fend off plaintiffs' lawyers. And it all started with him taking over basically the FDA's position and putting them in between consumers having their day in court and justice. It's kind of unbelievable.
So let's just think about the logic of this and how unbelievably absurd it is that basically it's like this. The drug company tricked the FDA to get approval, right? People were harmed by the drug, and then the FDA is coming in and saying, no, we approved it. So you can't sue the drug company that tricked us into approval.
That is 100% correct.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. And a lot of judges buy into it. Thankfully, a lot of judges see the absurdity of it and shut it down. So we usually win this issue these days. But the fact that we even have to fight it is just bonkers. And, with the current Supreme Court, who knows what will happen? I mean, they keep changing laws left and right. So who knows? Yeah.
And it sounds like it's just it's a legal tactic to slow down the trial, to cost more money, to just, to just gum up the works. Right. So here's the thing. I shared this on my Facebook page a few weeks ago, and it just reminded me something you said earlier about, you don't want to take a pharmaceutical drug unless it's been on the market 30 years, which I totally get it. Right. But the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force just updated their guidelines for aspirin. I don't know if have you seen this yet?
I have not. Oh,
Okay, so aspirin is considered one of the safest drugs, right? It is known that daily aspirin use can increase internal bleeding, like intestinal bleeding. So there's risk to it for sure. But so anyway, they have updated their recommendations, and they're saying now they do not recommend that people over 60 take daily low dose aspirin to prevent heart attacks and strokes.
That seems like I mean, I make sense, and also I'm not surprised because it seems like, I mean, aspirin has a lot of like really nasty side effects that happen every once in a while. Very rare, but they can be pretty terrible, like involving serious skin reactions that basically, for all intents and purposes, feels like your skin's melting off your face and you in your body and you die. It's pretty horrible. I mean, there's some pretty nasty stuff that's been known for a long time, but that's interesting. Yeah,
because we've all heard that. You take a baby aspirin for cardiovascular disease. It's a blood thinner, whatever.
Well, hey, Bayer, who owns Monsanto, that's what they're known for. They're known for the aspirin, the safe thing that everyone can take daily. And that's interesting now that that's sort of being questioned. That's not surprising that it took this long, but it's
to just close the loop on that. Aspirin been on the market for 120 years, right? And they're just now like figuring out, oh wait, maybe it isn't as safe as we thought. So anyway, my point is like, even after 120 years, you still don't know what, we're still learning things about what pharmaceuticals can do to your body that are not good. Anyway.
Well, I think frankly, let's just be honest. Most pharmaceuticals don't cure the problem, right? They just mask it. And aspirin's one of those examples. Aspirin's not going to fix any problem you have. It's designed to mask, certain types of blood pressure issues or a headache or whatever, right?
Inflammatory symptoms and pain.
Yeah, there's something causing that. And the pharmaceutical industry has zero interest in curing anything, right? Because that doesn't make them any money, right? If people actually are not sick, they have no customers. I mean, people forget that that's actually the basic economic model of the pharmaceutical industry, which is why every once in a while when they do cure something, they then charge outrageous amounts of money, right? When they had a cure for hepatitis C that came out, I don't know if you heard about it. It's an injection, very exciting. They actually cured a disease, but each shot was like $40,000 and you had to get 3 of them. It's kind of like, okay, I see how it works. But anyway.
Yeah, they want lifetime customers. They don't cure disease, and they want you to be on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pills, right? As many as possible for the rest of your life. And so, I think most people can sit, kind of take a step back and think about that and realize, that's true, right? They're not curing people. They're not increasing health and vitality. They are just masking and mitigating symptoms. And so what we've got is people just walking around being what I call vertically ill.
That's right.
Right? They're in a state of vertical illness, right? They're not horizontal. They can get out of bed and they can function, right? But they're not well. And so anyway,
I think what's really interesting here, though, is if you talk to the pharmaceutical industry, and I've deposed executives on these types of things, and their viewpoint is, well, listen, sure, there's some underlying issue, but people's lifestyle choices are what's causing them. And we're not forcing people to eat, crappy food or to smoke or to do all these things that lead to these later, consequential health issues. And so we're just helping them maintain their lifestyle. And, this is the price you pay for, eating crappy food. I mean, that's sort of their viewpoint on it. And the creepy thing is there's some truth to it, right?
That's true.
We have
personal
responsibility about what we do and put in our bodies. Now, there's another conversation about, okay, can you eat not crappy food, right? Glyphosate, Roundup, isn't everything we eat, including organic food. So even if you want to do right, can you? That's a deeper, even that doesn't lead into the problem with our food system. But it's an interesting discussion because there's a lot of blame to throw around, and it's you don't want to villainize just one person too much and not take personal responsibility for the things you can control.
Absolutely, I'm all about personal responsibility, and our choices matter, right? And what you put in your mouth every day matters, and what you put on your body matters, and the way you think and act. And, all of those things contribute to health or disease over time. And, so again, my big message to my audience, right, is that you've got to change your life. You've got to start
Yeah.
doing things differently, and it starts with changing your daily routine. But I should point out that while the pharmaceutical industry is correct that it's our lifestyle choices, they're acknowledging, well, we're just helping people, maintain their lifestyle or whatever. They also have this massive, massive influence on healthcare, right?
Mhm.
On doctors,
Oh yeah.
right? And so doctors are trained to prescribe drugs instead of trained to help people change their diet and lifestyle and get well.
And consumers are trained to want drugs, right? With the
Yeah.
various commercials and advertisements. If you go into a doctor with a problem and you don't walk out with a prescription, sometimes the consumer feels like, the patient feels like, what the heck, you didn't do anything. And so
Yeah.
the doctors feel compelled to give you something. I've definitely been in a doctor's office and had some issues. She said, well, you're fine, whatever, just wait it out. But I can give you a prescription of blah, blah, if you want. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? If I want? Like, no, you're the doctor. Tell me if I need a drug and I'll decide if I want to take it. But if I want, no, then I don't want it, right? Why would I want to do something that I don't need? It doesn't make any sense. And then she's like, well, it's because, a lot of patients feel like they need something. Like, if they're not given a script, then why'd they come? Why am I involved in the process? And you're like, it's an interesting dynamic.
Absolutely. I think most patients do expect a prescription, and what I call magic bullet medicine.
Yep.
Magic bullet medicine is this conditioning that we've all experienced, where we're looking for the quick fix to our problem. And
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical industry has, set themselves up as we have the pill for every ill, right? And if you feel bad, if your legs are restless, if your joints are achy, if you have trouble sleeping, if you have inflammation, like, watch this commercial of really happy people riding a bicycle built for two and having a picnic and swinging on a swing set and in a little rowboat, going across a little pond, right? This could be your life, right? If you
Yeah.
just take exoblamumab or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, and it's false, it's marketing, it's propaganda. And but yeah, that's what they're doing. They're just advertising constant. I mean, every other ad on television, on some channels, is a pharmaceutical ad. I mean, they're one of the biggest advertisers on television, one of the biggest. And
And
so,
it's so funny. Most of the money spent in marketing by pharmaceutical companies is actually not to us, right? They have a
I know where
sales
you're going with this.
force, and they go and they meet with physicians. They're called detailers or sales average. There's different words for them. But what they do is they sit down with the physician, they give them gifts and take them to symposiums and fly them to Hawaii and talk to them about this drug. And it's really funny. The doctors don't think it makes a difference. Oh, that doesn't influence me. I'm going to make my own medical decision. But the numbers don't lie. And there's a direct relationship to the amount of drug is used and how much money is spent. They've done studies on this, right? On detailing. And as soon as they stop detailing, as soon as it goes generic, right? And they stop the marketing machine and just now it's available, they can use it, whatever. The use of the drug decreases down to a very low level. And you talk to doctors, well, you were prescribing this drug, 50 prescriptions a week, and now you're doing one a month. What's changed? Well, there's just other products on the market now that might be more effective. Basically, they stopped being promoted to, and now they're being promoted with the next generation of medications, and they're using those. It's a freaking racket, the whole thing.
Yep, it's a racket. And in my book, I talk about this idea, evidence-based medicine and science-based medicine. These two concepts, and evidence. The term evidence-based medicine implies proof, right?
Yeah.
That's the implication, that there's proof. Science-based medicine implies truth, because people think science is truth.
That's right.
But what the system really is patent-based, profit-based medicine. That's
right.
what it is, because they only look at science and evidence that can lead to a highly profitable, patentable drug, right? So it's a very narrow funnel. All the science on diet and lifestyle for healing, reversing chronic disease, preventing chronic disease, all of that science is completely ignored by the pharmaceutical industry. They just
Well,
don't care.
there's
There's
no
no
money
money.
in it. There's no
Yeah.
money in it.
There's no money there. And so they know where the money is. It's in a drug they can sell for 10 years, like you said, with an exclusive patent. And as soon as that patent's winding down, they're looking for the next patentable drug they can start pumping to replace that revenue
They
from the whatever
literally call it their pipeline. That's what they call it.
yeah, the pipeline.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to dig into some of these cases with you.
Sure.
What should we talk about first? Should we talk about Monsanto?
Well, let's talk
Roundup?
about Zantac first, because that's what
Okay.
I'm actively working on. And it's something that's sort of kind of currently in the universe and people should be aware of. So basically, in 2019, the end of 2019, an independent laboratory called Valisure, and it has an interesting business model. What they would do is they would routinely test batches of medications that they had bought abroad to make sure they're safe before they sent them out to their clients, their pharmacy clients. And they were testing Zantac, a very common antacid, also known as ranitidine, which is the chemical ingredient within it. And they discovered that there was this like bonkers levels of something called NDMA, not to be confused with MDMA, the
Yes.
active ingredient in ecstasy.
Right.
NDMA. And NDMA is this terrible molecule that was discovered in the 1930s when they were developing rocket fuel for the first time. It has literally no purpose in our society. It's kind of like this horrible chemical. And what it does is it's very small, it gets in the body, and it causes adducts in DNA pretty aggressively. You have the double helix of the thing. It actually gets jammed in within it, and it causes all sorts of DNA misfirings.
DNA damage.
Exactly, genotoxicity, which then leads to mutations and cancer. And so it's been a known carcinogen for years, and they were finding large amounts of it. Anyway, long and the short of it is, by April of 2020, the FDA had actually pulled it off the market because they discovered that this Zantac, or the ranitidine molecule, would actually fold in on itself and form into NDMA, that it had the component parts of it. Now, everyone always goes, well, hold on a second, Brent. I mean, this has been on the market since 1983. It's been on the market for 40 years. What do you mean they just discovered this in 2019? Well, here's the truth of it. GSK, the company that developed it, did the very test that they did in 2019 back in 1982, before it ever came on the market. And they saw the same thing. They saw the NDMA. And they went, well, that's not good. And so they said, well, that's probably not realistically an issue. And they didn't share it with the FDA. Again, they control what is seen. So they buried it. And
let me ask you, would the FDA have, was there enough known about NDMA at that point that the FDA,
100%.
that the FDA, assuming they were, on the up and up at that point in time, probably would have said, hey, this is a problem?
Yeah. It being a known carcinogen is something that has been known since the mid-70s, and it's been a known problem with certain medications. So this was actually the International Agency for Research on Cancer had been sort of developing special tests designed specifically to test for NDMA because they were concerned about it being such a problem. And so this was well known in the 80s. And it was well known that if the FDA saw that there was an issue with NDMA formation, that they probably wouldn't have approved it. So they buried it. And by 1987, came on the market in 83. By 87, Zantac was the best-selling drug in history, right? And it took to 2020 for us to finally get to the truth of it after how many hundreds of thousands of people were exposed to this NDMA without their knowledge. And so I represent people who have cancer, a lot of people, thousands and thousands of people of all sorts of cancers that we believe and will prove in court that their cancer was caused by their long-term use of Zantac, because they were ingesting NDMA for decades and they got ravaged by it genetically.
It's so egregious and infuriating, but I'm not surprised, because to me, like, this information to me, it's like, oh, here's another one. I mean, look, if you watch television, like we talked about earlier, almost, not every, but many, let's just say this, many pharmaceutical drug ads tell you at the end of the advertisement that this drug may increase the risk of certain types of cancer. That's a very common statement. Sometimes it's even more specific, like may increase the risk of lymphomas or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're telling you that many drugs on the market can increase your risk of cancer. Obviously, they didn't with Zantac. They didn't disclose it there, which is why they're in so much trouble.
Well, I think if they had disclosed the issue early on, I don't think it ever would have hit the market. I think the FDA would have said, no, 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 we don't want this situation
because the NDMA is such a problem.
Yeah, and also there's plenty of other drugs in the space that don't have this problem that are just as effective. So there's no reason to approve something that has this greater risk when it's the risk effectively outweigh the benefits, right, of a new drug. So I think the FDA even, and that's why they pulled it off the market. When the FDA found out about it, they pulled it, right? They said, no more of this. And obviously they did it in their FDA way where they're, well, this isn't a big issue. Don't worry, it's safe, but just don't take this drug. That's kind
right.
of all right.
Yeah. I read the headlines. I remember reading the headlines and thinking, boy, this is such a soft admission, right? It's like I was trying to get just like a hard statement about it, and I couldn't find one. But it was like, okay, they've pulled it for cancer concerns or whatever. It was the language was so nebulous and whatever. But obviously, actions speak louder than words, especially in this case. Yeah. But the point I was kind of getting at earlier was, we know that pharmaceuticals are causing cancer. Many of them are disclosed to cause cancer, and people take them anyway, right? And then when you get cancer, it's like, how did I get cancer, right?
I agree with you, but I'll take one point on this. Is like, if someone wants to go smoke cigarettes, right, eyes wide open. We know that cigarettes cause cancer. Anybody who tells you otherwise is just a bold-faced liar, right? Cigarettes cause cancer. They all sorts of cancers. They increase risk of cardiac disease. And when you buy a pack of cigarettes, it says right there, Surgeon General's warning may cause. Nobody's smoking today that isn't saying, okay, I'm taking this risk. That's your choice, right? When it comes to like an antacid, and you're looking at a display of potential antacids, you got Tums, you got Tagamet, you got all these other drugs, and you see Zantac, and it says right there, caution, may cause cancer, formation of NDMA. I think most people are going to say, well, I'm going to probably pick one that doesn't have that warning, right? So I don't think they did warn. That's the issue. And if they had, we probably wouldn't have a lawsuit, right? But I also don't think it would be on the market, or it would have been very successful. And so I think warnings do affect consumer behavior to some extent, but it also depends on the issue, right? If you're taking a drug like chemotherapy, as you're familiar with, it itself increases the risk of cancer, right? And for certain people with certain types of cancer, that risk is worth it, right? Because you need to put that poison in your body to kill the cancer because you're in such a dire situation. Now, that's a decision everybody has to make individually. I think there's alternatives and whatever, but putting that issue aside, that's a decision people make with their eyes wide open. But if they learn that chemotherapy also, could lead to permanent hair loss, or could, basically shorten your life by 10 years, people might say they're willing to take other options, right? And I think making sure everyone's fully informed and can quantify those risks is the key.
Yeah, and that's a big gap in the cancer world. Is most patients are not fully informed. They're told very little. They're told you'll be sick, you'll lose your hair, you'll be nauseous. We have some drugs to help you get through it, that kind of thing. And they don't know that chemotherapy. A lot of them don't know that chemotherapy increases the risk of future cancers, and a lot of them don't realize that chemotherapy wipes out your immune system and can make cancer stem cells more aggressive. And so when the rounds of chemo are over, their immune system's destroyed, but they still have cancer stem cells that start multiplying, but they have no army, they have no defenses now. And so we see that over and over again with cancer patients. They're wrecked by chemo, and then the cancer comes back like wildfire because their army is destroyed. So anyway, that's
why, for example, in lymphoma treatment, and obviously we did a lot of work in lymphoma because of the Roundup litigation, which is centered on lymphoma. It's exactly right. after you go through chemo, if you get a recurrence after you, or it doesn't go away, you don't do chemo anymore, because what's left is chemo resistant, right? And you basically made the cancer 10 times worse in some ways. And then you have to go into the next levels, which often involves stem cell, bone marrow transplant, or some really interesting stuff called CAR T, where they literally remove all your blood, send it to a laboratory, filter it, and put it back into you. And you have to live in basically a hermetically sealed lab, because you have zero immune system, obviously, during that time, for weeks or months. It's pretty fascinating what they're doing these days.
Yeah, and they have been able to save some lives that way, and I think that's great. But it is, it's pretty serious when you have no immune system and you can't, and they're basically tell you, oh, your chemo doesn't, your cancer doesn't respond to chemo. Okay, but so let's talk about, so is there anything else that about the Zantac trial or the case that folks need to know, or that you find interesting?
The basic message is, if you took Zantac and developed cancer, you should call a law firm that's working on this. You can call mine, or you can call anyone's. It doesn't really matter. But legal rights get expunged over time. So if you want to take action, you should take action now. But it's a real serious issue, and God forbid, if you have any Zantac. Now, they actually re-released Zantac recently with a different chemical in it that doesn't have this problem. So if it's a new Zantac, it's fine. But if you have any Zantac prior to, April 2020, do not take it. Dispose of it per the FDA guidelines on hazardous waste, but do not take it, because it's filled with NDMA right now, and it will increase your risk of cancer. And you can get it from just one pill. It's unlikely, but it's possible. So just do not take it. Don't let anyone of your loved ones take it. Treat it like hazardous material and get rid of it.
Has there been any type of consensus on, how long a person would need to take Zantac before the risk of cancer was really high? Is there a pattern that you're seeing, like, well, people that took it for 3 years or 5 years, or, they almost all have cancer, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think our sort of minimum criteria is about a year of use. So you have to have used it for a year. But what does that mean? Some people take it once a week, some people take it twice daily, right? And so it's kind of a mushy criteria, in the sense of, if you're taking it twice a day for 6 months, okay, that's going to increase your risk considerably, right? If you took it once a day for a year, okay, that's probably going to increase your risk. If you took it once a month for a year, it's probably not going to be the case. So, sort of one of those mushy areas. The best thing to do is call a firm that's working on this, and they'll go through the process and figure it out. The thing is, with Zantac, most people didn't take it for a year or 6 months. Most people took it for 20 years daily. And so we have incredible levels of exposure. In our first cases, we're going to trial in Oakland in February of next year. So we'll be able to sort of show the world this story in all of its gruesome detail, and hopefully, get a verdict that sends a message to all those boardrooms when they're deciding whether or not to approve a new drug or warn. They go, maybe we should think twice because of that lawsuit. That's kind of my hope in my job, is that I create that conversation when the decision is being made.
It's also frustrating when you see that there have been a number of verdicts, against Pfizer and Merck, and almost every pharmaceutical company is, has been convicted of felony behavior, right? Criminal negligence, deception, deceptive marketing practices. I know you've got the whole list, I'm sure, in your head of everything that they've done, fraud and whatnot. And yet the penalties that they pay are almost never enough to make a significant impact on that company, right? Even on the profit from that particular drug that they got in trouble for, right?
Chris, it drives me nuts, because, here's a good example. I'm litigating this class action. So it's one of my rare class action cases, and we're actually using the civil RICO statute, the Racketeering and Corrupt Organizations Influenced Organization Act, which was created for mobsters.
Right.
Okay.
Explain racketeering, because it's a term that we don't hear very often, and people probably don't know
Well,
exactly what it means.
yeah, most courts don't even know what it means. So racketeering is actually a really broad definition, but basically, it includes stuff like extortion, intimidation, bribery, but it also includes mail fraud. So that means if you transmit over email or wire fraud, if you transmit over the wires statements designed to promote a fraudulent enterprise, then that's considered wire fraud, right? It's indictable, it's a criminal offense. And anyway, we're suing this company called Takeda and a company called Eli Lilly, who manufactured and sold this drug called Actos or pioglitazone. It was used to treat diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and it was very successful. They profited during its 10-year run about $24 billion. Okay. However, back before the drug came out, they knew that it could increase the risk of bladder cancer. Okay. There was a whole documented 10-year history of them suppressing it and fighting the FDA and making up BS stories, whatever. Finally, in 2010, the FDA realized that they'd been duped, put a cancer warning on it. And that was, of course, just before the drug went generic. So they had made their money and they were out. Led to a lot of lawsuits involving bladder cancer. They settled all of those lawsuits for $2.4 billion. So 10% of their profit. Okay. There's been some other, so I have this class action that basically says, no, you don't get to keep the money. For all the additional Actos that you sold that you wouldn't have been able to sold if you had told the truth, you have to pay it back to the third-party payers, the insurance companies, and the consumers. And then under RICO, you treble it. So hopefully it could be a many, many billions of dollars result. And actually right now I'm waiting on the court to rule on class certification. I've been waiting for the last few months. And so if we do it, it will be the first time this has ever been successfully done. And so anyway, that's a really interesting case. Obviously it's a class action, so it's going to happen one way or the other. But there's ways we're trying to create a legal framework that actually makes you pay instead of just paying a 10% tax on killing people and then moving on.
Yeah, making $24 billion and then paying a $2 billion fine is insane. I mean, if you think about what does justice look like? Well, first of all, at least $24 billion, right? All the profit paid back. And then there should be a penalty because you're not even penalized at that point. That's just, okay, you lost all your profit. Now you need to actually be penalized. So yeah, doubling, tripling the profit.
Is exactly what so in the Roundup case against Monsanto, I was doing closing arguments and I was talking about punitive damages, right? And I told the jury, I said, listen, if someone robbed a bank and you said your punishment is give the money back. Well, no. Sure, you give the money back that you stole, but that's the beginning of justice. It's not the end of it, right? Now you have to ask, what do you have to do to make sure they don't rob a bank again, right? And that's what we're doing here with Monsanto. And I showed the jury a wonderful email exchange where Monsanto was talking about whether or not they determined that Roundup causes cancer. They said it's $1 billion question. They said it in the email, right? And I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's $1 billion question. You decide what number they need to pay, to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that you send a message around the world. Came back with $2 billion verdict, right? So they heard the message, they heard the thing, and then here's the rub. The judge reduced it to $100 million.
Wow. How much did he get to keep?
Well, we're still on appeal. They haven't gotten paid yet. These things take years. Even after you get the big verdict, judges slash them and burn them, and then they go up on appeal and they go through this and whatever. I think that my clients will ultimately get $100 million, which is a lot of money. No one's saying it's not, but it's still a drop in the bucket for Monsanto and Bayer. And it's just upsetting because the justice system is very good at helping people get their recovery, but is terrible at punishing corporations. And that needs to change, but I don't know how to fix that. That's something that needs to be fixed at the highest level in our legal system. And
I like your I like your bank robber analogy because you're right. That's not a deterrent from doing it again. If anything, it's reinforcing bad behavior. It's encouraging bad behavior because oh, wow, I can rob a bank and just pay back 10% of the money I stole. Man, this is I like this. I like these angles.
Yeah, I
right?
know.
I
And
mean,
that's
you're
the
just going
thing
to keep
about,
robbing banks if you just
and
have
that's
to pay
the
back 10%.
that's the thing about drug companies, right? And that's what people don't understand is like drug companies aren't some monolithic evil corporation, right? They're not just like a bunch of evil people sitting, oh, I want to hurt people. No,
Right.
there are people like you or me. You might even be friends with people who work in pharmaceutical industry that you don't even realize that are fun, good neighbors, whatever. I get nothing against these people personally. They're doing their job. Their job is to make money and to make money for their shareholders. And if it makes money to lie to people, then they will do that, right? And until we shift those financial incentives, they will continue to do that because if they don't, not only are they not making much money, they're not fulfilling their obligations to their shareholders, but they're at a competitive disadvantage to all the other cheats out there doing it as well. So the system needs to change. And the best way to do it is to actually make them internalize the external costs that they're forcing on our society, which never gets done.
Is there any headway in criminal prosecution for individuals involved, pharmaceutical executives? I mean, that's, if things are going to change, it's like, that's really the precedent I feel like that also needs to be set where there are very nervous people at pharmaceutical companies going, I'm going to go to jail if, if we don't do this right.
I don't see that being that serious of a deterrent because what it will do is it will just scare away people who have any semblance of morality. So you'll just be left with people who are criminals, who will literally commit crimes because they know it's a crime. I think where you really create the disincentives is you actually make them personally liable financially, right? So you can get, so for example, in the whole opiate crisis, and you have the Sackler family, right? They're putting a tithe of what they made from addicting our country to opiates, and they're not being held personally liable, and the courts are protecting them, right? If they were made an example and they were bankrupted and every freaking dollar in that family was ripped out of them and given to people who are addicted in the cities and the states that are paying for that treatment, and they were made an example and they were put on, unemployment and had to live in the crappy apartments and do all the things that people who don't have money have to live with on a daily basis, then I think people who are sitting out there at the highest top might say, hey, listen, I'm not going to put my own future livelihood at risk here. If it was a criminal risk, they just wouldn't get into it together. But if there's a personal liability issue, they're going to say, let's just make sure we CYA. If they do that, maybe they fix the system. But until they're made an example of financially, I don't see why any executive's ever going to care because they're going to get away scot-free. And the Sacklers owned the company. They weren't just executives, they were owners. So they were directly responsible. But CEOs, they make billions of dollars, they get a huge golden parachute, and they're never held accountable. It's kind of a sweet gig for them, and there's really no disincentive for them not to play that game.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah. We're almost to the end of our time together. I appreciate you so much. Would you take just a minute or two? I know there's a lot of details to this, but I'd love for you to touch on the Monsanto Roundup Cancer case. So if anyone is not familiar with it, just sort of the highlights and the details of that case and what has happened there.
Sure. I mean, it's litigation that's still ongoing in many ways, but basically the product is called Roundup. The active ingredient in it is called glyphosate. And basically it came out in the 1970s. It's a pesticide / herbicide. It's a weed killer. And it's, become incredibly popular. The amount of glyphosate sprayed in our society is astronomical. In 1 year, the amount of glyphosate and Roundup that's sprayed in agriculture and at homes and whatever is more than all the pesticides ever sprayed ever in history. Just 1 year. That's how much is out there. It's in your food, it's in your water, it's everywhere. And what we've shown is people who spray it, right, who get the most exposure to it, it dramatically increases the risk of developing lymphoma or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma specifically. And this litigation has been going on for about 6 years. We've reached many, many billions of dollars in settlements and resolutions, but there's still people who are getting sick. I mean, these cancers aren't going away, and they're still selling Roundup today without a cancer warning. And so one of the things that if you sprayed Roundup or are spraying Roundup, first of all, and you don't know that it can cause lymphoma, stop spraying it. find something else. Killing weeds is not more important than suffering from lymphoma, which can be mild, but also can be horrendous. And the spectrum on lymphoma is just unbelievable. At the same time, if you have lymphoma and you sprayed Roundup, then you should see if you need to see what your situation is, and talk to a lawyer about what rights you have or don't have. My firm isn't actually doing cases anymore. We've moved on to other stuff, but there are lots of law firms out there who are doing it, and you should see what your rights are and discuss it with them.
Yeah, it'll be, I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome of that and the Zantac trial and the Actos, right? They're still all pending, right? They're still, yeah.
Yeah, well, the Actos case, yeah, we'll see. It's we're waiting on a ruling, and if we get the class certified, it will be the first time that's actually happened. I'm going to press the trial next year, and I'm going to show the jury all the garbage and all the crap that they did, and I'm going to ask them for them to pay back their profit. And then the judge will treble it, and we'll take it up on appeal. It'll probably take another 5 years before we get there, but if we can show the pharmaceutical industry that it can be done, it will. Hopefully some poor kid in the boardroom, when they're making this horrible decision, could raise their hand and say, hey, remember Actos? Maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe it's not financially worth it. And maybe we can change the economics of it. Who knows? But we'll see.
I hope so. I really do. And I appreciate your work. It's a lot of hard work to do what you do. And I know it takes a big team effort to bring these cases to trial and collect all this data. And it's I couldn't do it. I could not do what you do. And I just am so impressed by you and thankful for you that you're doing it, because somebody needs to do it. Is there information that you want to share with folks? Any resources you think people need to know about, a website or anything like that I don't know how active you are in social media and online and stuff, but anything you'd like to share there for folks?
Well, I know our firm has a pretty active and robust website and blogs and articles that we do about different issues that we're seeing in litigation. Another thing that we do is, for example, in the Roundup case and every other case we try, we post everything on our website, all the documents, all the studies, all the exhibits. We post transcripts of trials. And we even have YouTube videos of like my openings and closing arguments from Roundup. If you're interested in seeing all that, it's all there. On our website, baumheadlandlaw.com. You can get lost in that thing forever. But I think if you're looking for issues about, personal safety on medications you may be taking or thinking about giving to someone you love, the first thing I would say is just Google it and get past the pharmaceutical ads and get past the WebMD paid for BS articles and see if there's any litigation involving the drug, because those are usually where you start seeing the truth pop up pretty cleanly. And I would, make sure you study your medications before you take them and actually read the label. The labels actually do have information on it, and actually ask yourself, is this risk worth the benefit? I know my doctor has said that the doctors are paid to prescribe you medications, so they're not the best people. Ask yourself, is this something that I'm willing to take a risk on? And if it's not, then don't take it and find some alternative. But don't just be a zombie who does what your doctor says. Question authority and make informed decisions, because if you do that, you'll live longer.
Great advice. I love it. Thank you so much, Brent. And you're awesome, and I'm glad to connect with you and excited to share this interview. Thanks for watching. Please share this far and wide. People need to know what's happening behind the scenes so that they can be informed and empowered and not sucked in to dangerous, potentially dangerous drug use habit. We'll just call it that. And so anyway, thanks again, Brent. This has been awesome. See you guys. See you on the next one.